Hello everyone and welcome to our live stream, June the 11th, 2024, Tuesday after the Canadian Grand Prix. 10 days time, almost, the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona. Apologies for the error I made in the video after Canada saying it was a triple header. The problem is I made the mistake, the fatal mistake of using whatever system it is in the software these days to sort of get the F1 calendar put into my Google Calendar. And what I never did, stupidly, was of course check the colours, and they're all in exactly the same colour as a lot of other events I've got. So I just looked at the green, oh yeah, there's another race here, another, oh wow, yeah, without looking actually at the details. So I'm really sorry about that. I hope nobody goes to the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona this weekend. If so, you can blame me. Anyway, thanks for joining me wherever you are in the world, whatever time zone you are in. Welcome to our live stream, where basically the format is very, very simple. You use the YouTube chat to make comments, questions, talk amongst yourselves, obviously with a certain amount of decorum, and no swear words, please, and be nice. And it's over to you, really. It's your thoughts. I'd be interested to know what everybody thought about that Canadian Grand Prix, because we had a little bit of time for the dust to settle, perhaps not as much as we need, given how complex a race it was. I say complex, there were so many phases to the race, so many different parts. I mean, in my post-race video, I didn't even mention the decision by, Ayao Komatsu to put both their cars, Haas cars, on wets, which, bearing in mind he's a tyre guy and he's a really good racer, I can just sort of imagine his train of thought, which was, well, we're not going to win this one, but let's put some wets on. It's good enough for wets right now. Let's see what we can do. And he enlivened the show. It was brilliant. And yeah, okay, they had to come in, but nonetheless, they got a pretty good result, just out of the points, but good result for both Haas drivers after the debacle of Monaco. So that was good. I didn't mention that. There's probably a lot of other things I didn't mention as well, which you're very free now to mention at your will. So no more ado then. That's going to work there. Just pause for a second. Chat amongst yourselves while I get my browser in. Here's the first question. As ever, I'm doing it based on who's lined up in the pit lane there to be first out. As we saw in Canada many times, Red Bull and Max, they didn't get a penalty for that thing in the end, where they just sort of edged out in front behind Piastri. And why didn't they get the penalty? Basically, I think, as I suggested at the time, because they then let everybody go, it was inconsequential. There was a big question about whether they're actually working on the car, that's right, in the wrong lane of the pit lane, the middle lane. But I don't think they did. They're pretty switched on at Red Bull like that, aren't they? Anyway, Lee Kambanga begins the show today with the question, can we completely say other teams have caught up with Red Bull, or it's just that the last three tracks exposed the weakness of the RB20, hence they struggled? The coming tracks will suit them more. Well, Lee, you ask a very good question there, and I'm sure that's the question that all the teams, all the top teams anyway, are asking themselves as we speak, probably in their meetings right now. Their debrief, whatever they're doing, performance briefings, whatever. That's what they're all asking themselves. I don't think they know the answer either. And it's a simple consequence to that, because if they did know the answer, it wouldn't be as it is anyway. They'd all be at the front, wouldn't they? Kind of, if you see what I mean. So, yeah, I don't know if Red Bull are confident in knowing that their car will be back to sort of square one as we get to Barcelona, Silverstone, Austria, or whether the others have got it. I think, all I can do is offer my opinion here, which is that I was going to check that the sound's good as well, because it's another thing I often get wrong, isn't it? Let's make sure the old mic is moving as it should. 1 second, where are we? OBS, here we go. Yeah, it looks to be all right. My opinion, as I've said all along, that these regulations have been around long enough and have been left alone for long enough. In other words, haven't been drastically modified, things banned or whatever, for long enough for everybody with half an ability to put together a technical package to get their head around it. And there is a brick wall at the end of this regulation, which they're all starting to approach. Now, Red Bull, you could argue, have been sort of there or thereabouts near this brick wall for the last 12 months, and they're doing very small developments. Whereas the McLarens of this world, to some extent Mercedes, to some extent Ferrari, have all made bigger jumps because they've been coming from further back, and now they're not far away from the brick wall. Now, whether they will as consistently remain near the brick wall as they need to in order to finish second on a bad day or third on a bad day, as Red Bull can, is another question. But I think in terms of outright performance and winning races and having a chance going in to most circuits on any given weekend, I'd say it's much more open now, for sure. And Red Bull will be thinking, we're not going to get it right at all the circuits. We're not going to get it right at 90%. We're probably going to get it right at about 75% of the circuits. And on those other 25%, we need to make sure we're in the points, possibly even on the podium. And that's what they'll be thinking, I imagine. Because, as I've said many times, you can't have a car that is perfect for every circuit, particularly with these ground effect regulations. It's very, very difficult in terms of ride height and bouncing. And what Red Bull did, have just refined the overall aero efficiency they have, bearing in mind the number of circuits that do have quite long straights and slow corners or whatever it is. And they've got the car optimized for that highest average. Ferrari did a very good job over the winter of giving their drivers a bigger sweet spot, which is why they now perform very well on circuits where the straights aren't that important, because in doing that, they've sacrificed some top speed. McLaren arguably made the biggest step of all because they've got a bigger sweet spot. They've got very good drivability in the car, and they're pretty good on the straight. Very good on the straight now. So that's the biggest step forward for sure. And then Mercedes, yeah, very good in Canada. Not as good as McLaren, but you could argue not that far away from them for the first time in quite a while. And that's promising too. And then Ferrari going from a circuit with no straights, but lots of interesting corners, medium, high speed and slow speed corners, unbelievably quick, to a circuit with a lot of straight line stuff, unbelievably slow. And then throw into all that the Red Bull business of the car, it's showing up because of the extremes they're now being pushed under. It's showing up this ability to ride curbs. But as I said in the video, it didn't exactly hurt Max, did it, in the race? And you could argue that maybe it helped Red Bull contain the graining on the tyres, having to be so careful about the curbs as well. So yeah, good question. Thank you very much for that. But as I say, I think all the teams are probably thinking exactly what you're asking. JS says, "Hi Peter, thanks for your insight, which enriches my enjoyment of Formula One." Well, thanks very much, assuming you're not at the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend. "Recently did a Donington track day in my old BMW Z4 and met Rob Wilson, impressed by how friendly and encouraging he was. Made my day." Oh, isn't that nice to hear? Dear old Rob's not that well at the moment, so I'm sending my love and fondest wishes to him. He's still teaching and doing his stuff, but he's going through a bit of an issue at the moment. So best wishes to Rob for clean bill of health in the near future, please. But yeah, he is a lovely guy, Rob. And my friendship with Rob goes back to his Formula 3 racing days when I got to know him, a shaggy-haired New Zealander. It was when I got to know Nigel as well. And we didn't keep in touch then, I guess, for about 10 or 15 years. And then I bumped into him again. We had a coffee in London, and I just suddenly was blown away by what he was now doing and how he had this epiphany of going to a track when he was racing in America in something like Sports 2000, maybe Indy Lights, something like that. And there was a new track in Tamiami, Florida, which had been designed by Emerson, actually. And Rob was telling me about it, and he went there and he'd been winning quite a lot of races and going well. And he got to this track and he said it was the first track I'd ever been to in my life when the corner didn't exist. In other words, every other track he'd ever raced at, there was always at least one corner when you came up with that famous dilemma of if I don't take this corner flat, life won't be worth living. And that corner didn't exist anymore. That were all slow corners. And he was frustrated and annoyed, and he went to bed that night thinking about what he was going to do. And he woke up the next morning with this epiphany, which was, I'm going to have to learn how to be quick on slow corners. And that's when he started, long, long ago. And that's really what he's all about now, is still, I was talking to him just recently, and his latest thing that he's, sorry, let me just rephrase that. The thing about Rob is that he never, ever stops learning or criticizing himself or wanting to improve his brain in a number of areas, but particularly in the question of vehicle dynamics and driving and inputs of forces and movement. And that's where he's so good. Unique, I think, absolutely. And he said, it's the rate of change of dynamic weight that is now so critical. It is sometimes it's as small as whether or not you have overlap between throttle and brake at high speed braking. Just a tiny millisecond of overlap can massively change the dynamic load and weight going through the car. And we talked about that for quite a long time, actually. And I asked him the question again about whether or not he was ready to think that a lot of what he teaches could be adapted to simulators, so that you don't have to go to Bedford or wherever on a wet day in winter and do the days in actual road cars, and whether you could do it all in a simulator. And Rob said no, it was still a long way away from simulating all those dynamic weights on a simulator. It's a long way away, so it just can't be done. So yeah, and you're a lovely guy, very quick still, absolutely right on it in terms of pace. That's the amazing thing about Rob. Anyway, thanks for that question, JS. Aaron Lee. Hi Peter, is there any tension between Pirelli and any teams regarding which compounds they decide for each race, given that different cars are better on different compounds? Well, that's a very good point, Aaron, and just purely coincidentally, I've actually prepared I've got an image here of the compounds coming up. You can see there, they've just announced for Spain and Great Britain, Silverstone, they're going to the hardest in the range, and Austria the softest, as we had in Imola, Monaco and Canada. Now, it's interesting when you get the press release from Pirelli announcing these compounds, all the decision making is based on the track surface, the abrasion of the track, the potential weather conditions sometimes, but they can't really anticipate that other than historically, of course. They can't allow for something dramatic. So it is all about Pirelli doing their homework well, based on data, based on all the information they know and love. And you'd have to be a pretty brave team owner, I think, to speak out against it, because it's the same for everybody. That's what always the response would be. And Pirelli are coming up with the best compound they can, given all the requests they have from the FIA and Liberty to have tyres that maybe fall off the cliff, don't fall off the cliff, tyres that do this, tyres that do that. It's a technical thing. So it's a technical decision based on the track surface more than anything, and the loading going through the car. And Silverstone and Barcelona, very, very high loads through the tyres as well. So no surprise that they're going to the very hard compound there, the hardest in the range. And Austria is going to be super soft. But it's interesting, just going back to that compound, you can see basically, and putting Miami, you can say, in the middle, obviously. But if you look at Imola, Monaco, Canada, all softest, that McLaren very good on all of those. And so it'll be interesting now to see how the Red Bull compares with McLaren, for example, in Barcelona on this harder of the compounds, whether or not it is something that's suited to the car. But in answer to your question, Aaron, I think it's beyond the teams to go to the media and say, it's not fair, we wanted to have the medium compound and Pirelli have given us the hard compound for everybody and it suits Ferrari. Because bottom line is it is the same for everybody. Tough, get used to it. I think, sadly, it would be the response to all of that. But it's a very, very important point. And, we do not know how much of an effect the soft compound for the last 3 races has actually had for Red Bull and for McLaren, because there's no comparison, obviously. All you can say is that it makes McLaren look pretty good. So that's an interesting point, isn't it? Chris McClelland. Hi, Peter. Always great to hear your views, and love how you don't talk too much about rumours or hearsay. Well, yeah, too busy to get involved in all that stuff. For me, a lot of it comes under the heading of gossip as well. And it's very difficult in this world, especially these days, to stay away from gossip and not get involved in it all. But one should try, I think, because, you always have to think, well, if they were gossiping about me, would I like it? No, I better not. So I better not do it for anybody else. Anyway, I was a Formula One Racing reader back when you were there. F1 Racing loved your 98 Luxembourg Grand Prix column. Really? Luxembourg 98. Okay. Yeah, well, thank you very much. That's very kind, Chris. A great days from F1 Racing. Loved it. As a matter of fact, I was just been doing something really enjoyable in preparation for the British opening of the F1 exhibition, which is I'm just going through all the best photographs I can find from the last 20 or 30 years. And a lot of them, of course, are pictures that I know well from F1 racing, and Darren Heath and the other great photographers we had there. And going through and looking at all those photos again, it's just been sheer pleasure, I must say. So that's going to be fun when that gets going, that exhibition, I think. This is from Aaron Lee, trying to get my head around 2026 regs. Why would they announce publicly only for the teams to complain about feasibility immediately? Weren't they already in consultation privately? Well, don't forget the rules are not out yet. This is all based on what the rules are going to try to achieve. So the FIA have done this launch obviously on a rendered car, and it's all about the philosophy of the regulations rather than the specific ones. Although, of course, there are numbers in there. The amount of downforce they're hoping to save, minimum weight of the car, size, etc. Weren't they already consulted privately? Yes, they were consulted privately, but they don't necessarily then define the rules. They just put their input. They have their input, and there are certain parameters around which they're going to design the car. The FIA feel this is the way to go, and the team's information is filtered in. And of course, when the first information comes out, yes, there will be dissenters, and there'll be teams who say, this isn't what we want, this isn't going to work. For example, regenerative brakes only on the rear. Now, why is that? That's because the incumbent Formula One teams feel that teams like Audi, just to name but one, who have experience in endurance racing with regenerative front braking, will have an advantage. So that's definitely one of the reasons we don't have that. So there's an example of the team's desires filtering in even at this early stage. Now, I personally think it's a bit much to do that, because there's a lot of talk about how these new 50% electrification regulations have attracted Audi, Honda back into Formula One, Ford are in, and they're saying, isn't this great? Isn't it wonderful? And yet Audi come in because of this, and then they say, oh no, but you can't use that system that you developed in endurance racing because it might upset the existing teams. But you can't have your cake and eat it, I think. And I think that's a good example of that. And it still shows there's a lot of what's the right word? There's a lot of skew in terms of the organisers of the sport, the commercial rights holders, the exercisers of the regulations, the FIA, and the teams, the competitors. And there's a big skew between all three in terms of where we should be going and how we should be doing it. And if we want an Audi, should we let them come in on their own terms? Because one of the things they presumably thought at some point was that, wow, our technology from endurance racing might be an advantage for us, and that's a good thing. But here they are already, F1 people, saying, oh no, we don't want them to have any advantage. Toyota know all about that attitude as well. But yeah, I've done a long discussion with Scarbs on the new regulations. That video is going to be published very shortly, and it's about 30 minutes long. And we go through the whole aspect of the car, all the genesis of the regulations, and what they're trying to achieve. So I think you'll enjoy that. So watch out for that. Chris McClelland, you said it again. You said at the time it was one of the best under pressure drives we've seen. Hakkinen, and it was a perfect example of great contest not needing overtaking to necessarily be captivating. Oh, okay, yeah, 98 Luxembourg, got you, absolutely. Yeah, I did. And to some extent, I thought that applied to the last 10 laps of the Canadian Grand Prix, because, yeah, there was some overtaking, obviously, going on with George Russell and the McLarens and Lewis and George. But in terms of the race lead, Lando didn't get really anywhere near Max. And yet, for me, that was the captivating part of those last 10 laps. It was Max versus Lando in that very good McLaren, and how well Max drove. And we didn't see too much of it, or the TV didn't show too much of it, the director, because he was focused so much on the George Russell stuff and all the rest of it. But for me, those 10 laps that Max drove are maybe the best 10 laps he's ever driven in his life, to be honest, because I don't think that RB20 was as good as the McLaren at that point of the race. And And yeah, and that's a good example of that is what Formula One is all about. And it's interesting, isn't it, that all the directors and the cameras were all on the overtakes, but actually the pure beauty of what Max was doing was lost. And that's a shame. But yeah, and I was making the same point about Mika and how well he drove that day. Thank you. Sheriff of Sandervoort. Hi, Mr. Windsor. What do you think of the Lawson case? It seems that Red Bull has already started to forget him. This weekend, Laurent Mekies and Horner were interviewed in television about the future young drivers, and all they repeated was Hadjar's name, to the point where we had to remind him that Liam's there too. Well, it's very sad, isn't it? He's got a second question, but I'll come up with that in a second. It's very sad, and that's one of the things that's always irritated me about motor racing in general, is how difficult it is for very talented young guys to make it, and some do and get the breaks at the right moment, some don't. And when I was out there trying to help Nigel Mansell get into Formula 3, let alone Formula 2, Formula 1, it was based on that adrenaline rush I had at the time, and still have really, that it's just appalling how young talent isn't recognised. Today it's a very different system, although I do think that a driver as talented as, say, Nigel could still make it with somebody alongside him pushing like crazy, using all his connections and getting him there, even without money, which is what we did with Nigel. But yeah, you're right. I mean, for me, it's Felipe Drugovich. I mean, they talk about you've got to win, win, win. You win the Formula 2 championship, and what happens? You sink like a stone. I mean, Teo Pourchaire is now doing IndyCar. Good for him, great for IndyCar, but what a loss that is. Felipe Drugovich, similar example. Liam Lawson, another example. And so it goes on. Frederick Vesti, all good, very, very talented drivers. And I'm sure everybody has their own guys that they would talk about. And yeah, it just breaks my heart to see these guys in the garage, and that's part of the deal, isn't it? They sign the contract with the young driver, and we guarantee you'll get 10 seconds of television time at a certain moment on Friday practice or whatever, standing in the garage next to the team principal. Oh wow, let's go for it. Yeah, it'll cost you 400,000 or whatever. And it's wrong. It's completely wrong. And yeah, Liam Lawson would have loved those conditions in Canada. He would have been really good as well, I think. I mean, Yuki had a messy race, didn't he? I think he probably would have done a better job than Yuki on the day in Canada. Daniel drove very well. And Liam, yeah, classic. But I still keep coming back to Drugovich, because I really rate Drugovich. There's many guys out there that I rate that we're probably never going to see in Formula One, and that's why I keep banging on about how we should have a second division Formula One championship. I did promise that I would come up with the circuits and drivers and cars for that next time, but I will. And that would solve all the problems. I mean, all the teams are doing a lot of testing now with last year's cars, with young drivers. Why aren't they putting that all together in a championship? It'd be much better for the drivers, much better for finding new sponsors, much better for Formula One spreading its wings into other parts of the world where the countries can't afford to be on the proper A division world championship. There's no downside, apart from that needs proper organisation, someone to get it together. But at the moment, the most you can get if you're a talented young driver and you don't have a lot of luck, the most you're going to get is some sort of test drive, academy drive, stroke, reserve drive position where you might do a bit of testing in an old car, and you might get to watch the computer screen at a race or two, and that's no good to anyone. The teams make money from all of that. That's the reason they continue to run that system. It's money for nothing. It's literally money for nothing. It's got all these young guys paying to be on their academy, and they don't have to do very much, do they? So, Sheriff of Sandervoort. A lot of questions from the Sheriff of Sandervoort, but anyway, and a second question. Can you tell us what you remember about the 95 season, marked by the Benetton Renault title, with Michael, new safety measures, and Nigel's retirement? Yeah, it was a funny time in Formula One in many ways, I think, because we'd just gone through the agony of 94, and to his credit, Max had already started to put into motion a proper safety study of the Grand Prix car and how to make it safer, and that was underway. And the Athens accident accelerated that whole process. And Peter Wright, Sid Watkins, and a lot of other people should take credit for the way that then went with helmets and hands and everything else. But simultaneously, I think, Bernie had one of his greatest revelations, which was that we can't continue to have accidents like this. We've been told we can't, and now Carl Wendlinger's had this thing, and Mercedes has said they're going to pull out unless something has happened. Wendlinger at Monaco in '94, and Bernie's solution was to build spec super circuits in parts of the world that wanted to be on the Formula One calendar, had a lot of money, but had no motor racing heritage at all, and to go to work with his mate Herman Tilke and get this circuit built. And then along the way, he could refine the circuit design around television coverage and enhance the sponsorship potential of the sport by creating circuits that were perfect for circuit signage. And so, I'm not saying Bernie used it, but as a result of Imola, we had two threads of development in Formula One, massive change. One for the cars and one for the circuits. Max for the cars, Bernie with the circuits. And the first Tilke circuit was opened, 99, Sepang. And then it was all the others. Sepang beget Singapore, not Singapore, Turkey. And then India and others as well followed, many. So it was a time of massive change. And yeah, some measures were brought in too quickly, I think, from a safety point of view. Others were not. I don't know. I think it was a rather unsettling time in Formula One, because after those two accidents and Wendlinger's, I think in Formula One we all felt slightly nervous about the future of the sport. And Bernie and Max's era was ruled and governed by autocracy, and it was never more so than in that time. So yeah, that was it really. And then you looked at, you mentioned the Benetton thing. I was looking, and through these pictures I was looking at yesterday, all the pictures of Ross Brawn and Rory and all there in their Benetton kit, and you kind of, you know it, but you kind of forgotten that that's what it was like. And of course it was, Michael working with them all, and Frank Durney and all these guys at Benetton. And then suddenly Michael takes the whole lot to Ferrari, does his thing, with Todd and Brawn, obviously. Sheriff of Sandoval. Today is also the birthday of Sir Jackie Stewart, 85, the oldest living Formula One Grand Prix winner and living world champion. I hope he celebrates many more. Well, thank you very much. That actually passed me by because I've been flat out on something else this morning. No doubt Matt Bishop has had something going on Twitter. But happy birthday, Sir Jackie. You deserve it, or you deserve all the happiness you're getting right now, and I hope you're getting a lot. And I was lucky to be working with Sir Jackie at Monaco for 3 days. He's in very good form, very funny as usual. Cheeky, funny, just brilliant. I was standing up there in the Rolex suite with Tom Christensen, Mark Webber, Jensen Button, and Jackie, and we had a laugh. I must say, it was very funny. Another final one, I think, from Sheriff of Sandoval. By the way, can you share with us some memories of the greatest races qualifyings he did? Thank you. Love the channel. Well, certainly races with Jackie, it's not that difficult really. How about the 65 Rand Grand Prix when he drove a Lotus 33, substituting for Jim Clark, started from the pole, had a problem in the Heat 1, and then Heat 2 just disappeared into the distance. Not bad. First Formula One race. Then he won Silverstone Daily Express Trophy in the BRM. And later that year, he won the Italian Grand Prix at Monza from the BRM. Why didn't he go to Lotus? Because he felt the BRM was a bit more reliable, and anyway, he had Jimmy in the other car, so what was the point? But I think, if you look at even back then, I'd say one of Jackie's best races was a 65 Belgian Grand Prix in the wet at Spa, the old circuit. Beaten by Jimmy, got to say, but just beat everybody else easily. And the conditions were so bad at the end that Jimmy was backing off just to try to give a message to Jackie to back off and not take any risk, because it was so dangerous out there in Spa. So there was that. I mean, a lot of we have to say wet weather stuff with Jackie and how good he was in the wet. 68 Dutch Grand Prix on the groove Dunlops. First time Dunlops had grooved their tyres, I think, and he was just brilliant in the Matra MS 10, and the same car in the German Grand Prix 68 with his wrist in plaster from a Formula 2 accident at Jarama, and having to drive with that rigid plastic thing over his wrist, and just disappeared into the distance there as well in the 68 German Grand Prix. And it was wet. It was not only wet, but all the condensation and all the spray was contained by the trees, and the visibility was appalling. And Graham Hill finished second that day and went a long way towards securing the World Championship in 68. So that was it. I mean, Jackie was brilliant in the 67 H16 BRM, big lug of a car, massively heavy, particularly on a heavy fuel load. But the way he used to throw that car around was just amazing. I actually saw him at Alton Park, 67, when I was a kid. He and Mike Spencer in the two factory cars, and Jackie through Cascades. I'll never forget it. He was just, boom, throwing this lump of whatever it was around. Sounded fabulous, H16. But it was a big, heavy car, and Jackie was just all on top of it. I mean, don't ever think that Jackie was just this polished. Well, he was very polished, but he was also unbelievably quick and energized in the car. So, yeah. And then Emerson Fittipaldi reckons that Jackie's greatest race was the 73 Brazilian Grand Prix that Emerson won, but he couldn't believe that Jackie was not only second, but starting to put a bit of pressure on Emerson at the end of the race over the very, very bumpy old Interlagos in that very short wheelbase, low polar moment of inertia Tyrrell 003. The very darty car, very good at Monaco, but very, very darty on medium and high-speed corners, and bumpy as well. And Jackie just kept this thing on the island and drove beautifully that day. Many great races by Jackie Stewart. Many. 69 British Grand Prix with that dice with Jochen was as good as it gets, which unfortunately Jochen came in because the rear wing end plate bent on the 69 Lotus and had to come in and get that repaired, obviously. And then also I think Jackie's win in the 69 Italian Grand Prix to clinch his first World Championship was pretty good as well. And that was, a lot of credit for that should go to Ken Tyrrell, because on the night of the race, Ken said to Jackie, so tell me about your gear changing out of Parabolica up to the start-finish line. What gear are you in by the time you get to the start-finish line? And Jackie said, well, it kind of depends if I'm in a tow or not. But normally I'd be getting top just before the finish line, and I suppose it would change a little bit with the tow. And Ken said, well, that's not good enough. You don't need to be changing gear just before the finish line. We'll give you a longer fourth. And that's what happened. Jochen went to fifth and Jackie was still in fourth and just got him on the line. Good thinking, eh? That's how good the Stewart. I mean, it's simple things, and often I pontificate probably about how racing is relatively simple and straightforward, and it's massively overcomplicated today by a lot of the middle management systems. In brackets, I see Audi have just signed a performance engineer long before they've got any performance anyway. It seems odd, doesn't it? Anyway, all these titles they have. But anyway, not detracting from the engineer. I'm sure he's brilliant, but just these titles are just so overburdening, I think. Anyway, getting back to the point, it is all about those tiny little fine details, and I sometimes think that in the whole mess of all these decisions and all these committees and all this data and all this information, some of the really important bits get lost. And I think I'm right about that. Look at Lewis Hamilton in the race in Canada, wondering if he's got any medium tyres left he can use. I mean, how would he not know that? That's one of those really important details that they never even talked about, I guess, unless they were doing it all just to make us laugh and have a smile. Pranay Sharma, hi Peter. Why are there talks of Carlos going to Williams? I believe Audi's the best for him and his personality. Well, I would agree with you 100%. I mean, there's a lot of talk about how Audi are already behind the eight ball and not going to be ready, and well, they're going to be ready, but not going to be ready to be competitive out of the box. And also on top of that, it would mean doing a year at Sauber. But then, as I've said several times here, a year at Sauber, year at Williams. Okay, Williams will have a better year for sure. But in terms of the long-term view, surely Audi would be better than being in a Williams, potentially having to race quite hard to beat Alex Albon, who's not slow, and then hoping, because you've got a Mercedes engine in the back, that you might get a chance in the Mercedes factory team at some point, even though they've got Kimi and some other drivers, Mick and so forth, there lining up. So I don't get it at all. As much as I really like Carlos Sainz and I love his family and totally respect his dad, who's one of the heroes of my time, I just don't get this. I don't get it at all. I think there's a huge upside for Williams if they sign Carlos. I don't see there's any upside for Carlos. And I think, yeah, it would be really difficult for him to go to Sauber, I agree. But it'd be really difficult for him to be at Williams as well. And he would probably say, oh, well, Williams are ahead of Sauber, so they're the better of the two options. It's very short-term thinking, I think. One, and two, if I was Carlos, I would be trying to get... I mean, you got to say right now, I don't think Haas are far behind Williams in terms of overall performance and race-by-race consistency. Obviously, they had a couple of bad things, but they've done pretty well this year. And Carlos in a Haas Ferrari would not be a stupid thing at all to enable that team to grow into the next phase of where it should be. So that's something else. If he wants to, he would be staying within the Ferrari engine fold there, and that might not be a bad thing either. But I don't think he's thinking of that, and I don't think he's thinking of Sauber anymore, from what I can gather, or Audi. I think he's thinking of Williams. Everybody seems to be talking about that. So everybody always knows, don't they? It just seems so odd to do that. But didn't Logan Sargent have a terrible weekend? I mean, come on, Logan. Every time there was a safety car, it's like, oh, Logan Sargent's done something again. Not every time, but I mean, he needed to put in a good drive there. And when you're in Logan Sargent's position, young guy wanting to make it in a team that's relatively going quite well, but quite difficult car and everything, that's your moment. When the weather's terrible, that's your moment to do something very special. That's your moment. That's Portugal 85 for Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell, when Nigel finished 5th in that race from the back of the grid, from the pit lane. That's your moment when you're Logan Sargent, to be mega good in the wet. And he wasn't bad, but he just made so many mistakes. Anyway, Aaron Lee, I've been watching Formula One since 2018. I don't recall when wet tyres became useless. Even though it was clearly the right start tyre yesterday, it didn't do any good for Haas. Did Pirelli need to make changes? Well, the reason that the wet is like that is because if it's very, very wet these days, standing water everywhere, or torrential rain, they tend to delay the start. And so the starts generally are made in conditions that suit intermediate tyres. That's the issue. So that's why the wet is just there as something that, if they do have to drive in horrendously wet conditions for whatever reason, there is a tyre that will more or less cope with it. But as I said at the start of the show, full marks to Komatsu-san for putting his two guys on the wets. I know he knew for sure they weren't going to get very far, but why not just make a bit of a race of it and see what they were like? And you never know what happens. Might have got a safety car at the right moment. And so there you go. Tears of joy. Hi, Peter. Awesome to see Linus get a pole over in IndyCar after seeing your interview with him. Good stuff. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's really good, Linus, and congratulations to him. We'll try and talk to him again. He's some really good drivers now in IndyCar. And I go back to my point. Why aren't we creating a B Division Formula One championship for all this young talent out of Europe, and to have some Americans in there as well? But no, they're all in IndyCar. And there's a lot of really good young talent. Linus is another. I mean, I got to know him when he was driving for Boyo in Formula 4. And he was always quick. Formula 3, he was great. I remember going down to the Sunoco facility down on the south coast, where he got his award for winning the championship, and then that was a free drive at the Daytona 24 Hours. Really good, but nobody was taking much interest. But I just thought he was really quick and really good, and so happy for him. Nick Bosman, happy birthday, Jackie Stewart. Found great joy in reading Jackie's autobiography, Winning is Not Enough. Any other books you'd recommend? Oh yeah, Peter Manso's book with Jackie. I think it's called Speed, I think. Something like that. Some rather an odd title, but Peter Manso did a book with Jackie during the 1970 season, and it's almost in diary form, and it's really good. Very well written by Manso as well. I think Jackie and Manso fell out in the end, but I would recommend that one. Actually, to me, that's the definitive Jackie book, that Peter Manso book, M-A-N-S-O. Another one from Nick. Also, you've probably already talked about this, but does being a short corner driver also make managing tyres easier? Who puts more energy into their tyres, long or short corner drivers? Oh yeah, managing tyres much easier if you're a short corner driver, because it's not necessarily the line you're taking, but in order to be a short corner driver, you have to have very soft lump-free inputs in the car. That's what it's all about. It's being very supple and being able to hit the brake pedal pressure at exactly the right moment after a millisecond of touching, and all these things of keeping the car very soft and no lumps in it, no spikes. And then you can start shortening the corner. You can then extend the straight going into the corner and out of the corner. You can manipulate the car. So it's not so much that manipulation, it's just the inputs and the rate of inputs that you have to have in order to start shortening the corners. That perfect, almost perfect rate of input, by definition, allows you to do more in terms of time management. You're giving yourself a nicer platform. You're always starting from a square position before you load the car, basically, down to a millisecond. And that, of course, is much better for the tires. So it's that, really, not just the line, but also the way you use the inputs. And I think, in fairness to Max, over those last 10 laps in Canada, he wasn't using short corners everywhere. He was still using what the dry line had told him he had to use, because it was still a little bit wet on curbs in some corners. So it wasn't a question of line, it was a question of managing the weight of the car perfectly. That was what was so beautiful about those last 10 laps that Max drove. And I suspect, and I said this in the video, I've got to suspect it because there was no evidence there, but because we didn't see him that much, but I suspect there were the moments when Lando, with his slightly longer tendency corner, wanting to just load up the rear a little bit before he can get into the corner, that puts more load through the tyres, and that's probably why he started to get a bit of graining and Max didn't. Hi, Peter H. Hiya, Peter. Did I hear right that Checo's had his Red Bull contract extended? Yeah, well, I know that's a rhetorical question, but yeah, as I said, he brings, I don't know, let me have a look here. Somebody sent me it's Diego. Very good, very kind of him. I don't know if I can bring it up actually and show to the point where I can show you. It might even be the wrong way around or something, but let's just, these are all the sponsors that Checo brings to Red Bull, right? Okay, here we are. I don't know whether let's get out of the light. There you go. They're all the sponsors that, if Checo wasn't in the car, none of those companies would be on the Red Bull. Let's phrase it that way. Impressive, isn't it? And I've always said, that was the thing when Pastor Maldonado was racing. It wasn't so much that he was bringing a lot of money to Williams, it was that he had access to government-backed sponsors from Venezuela that he could take to Williams. And it's the same thing with Checo. I mean, it's not just, oh, Checo, this is how much it is. It's Checo sitting down and doing a proper deal on behalf of these companies. I don't know whether he probably doesn't take a commission, he just gets his retainer extended or whatever. So that's a really interesting point, I think, when we talk about paying drivers, because of course, the market is ruined by the drivers who can just afford to write checks. But in reality, if you're a driver of talent, let's say Felipe Drugovich is a good example. If I was Aston Martin, I would be using Felipe to try to generate as much new Brazilian sponsorship as I could. And I'd be really using him out there in Brazil to do that. And maybe they're doing that, I don't know. But to me, that's the right way of doing it. And it's the same with the Andretti thing. As I said before, if they're going to say no to Andretti, at least use the Andretti name in America to raise more money for Formula One, because we got an American team coming in, whatever year they want to give him the entry down the line, but at least be respectful and use that name, use that Andretti name. And that's what Red Bull do very well with Sergio Perez. Very well. They sit down and they do their deals, and and it's odd that that's unusual in Formula One. That should be what we've just seen there. That should be the norm, but it isn't really. A lot of it is, well, how much money have you got? Oh yeah, okay. We want the money all tomorrow. Pay us up. We want 90% up front, 10% over the next 2 weeks. It's sort of that sort of deal, and it's a shame, because look at the number of companies they've got there now. So yeah, that's part of it, and then on top of it, periodically, when he wakes up, he does a half reasonable job. He's moaning about the car now, isn't he? Which I think only just underlines how well Max drove in Canada. So it'd be interesting to see really interesting to see what Red Bull are like in Barcelona. on the hard tyre. I suspect, as I said before, Canada, I suspect they'll be right there and be very, very quick. But, and again, just to reiterate what he was going on about with the curbs at Monaco, and indeed during the race and in qualifying in Canada. If you win the race, suddenly the curbs don't seem that important, do they? JRB, hi Peter, thanks for all the live streams. If it was up to you, what would the Formula One calendar look like? How many races and which circuits would you choose? I wouldn't be this many, and I certainly wouldn't allow people like Peter Windsor to get confused as to whether it's a triple header, quadruple header, or double header, or indeed turn up at a circuit where there was no race taking place. Too many races, calendars too full, too many other sports to go to. I mean, Rally of Poland coming up soon. I think that clashes with Austria. Very ridiculous. You mean when FIA came up with the calendar, they didn't say, oh no, we can't have Poland there or we can't have Austria there because we want the fans to enjoy both. No, they never think about it. French Open, great final, same day as the Canadian Grand Prix. These people ought to get together. So that's what I would do. I would sit around with all the sport, the governors of all the other sports that I like, don't care about anything else. And I'd make sure there are no clashes, first of all. I'd keep the Formula One calendar down to about, 15, 18 races max. I'd have more testing, and I would have a B Division Championship anyway. And those, I suppose, you'd have to allow them to clash with some other sports, because then you'd be dominating everything. But I'd make sure, the reason I go for a relatively short Formula One A Division calendar is because I want the Formula One B Division Championship to have its own calendar that doesn't clash with A Division. So that's why I would go for 18 and have about 10 to 12 races in the B Division Championship. So there's your 28 races, I guess, in total, with different drivers, different cars, obviously, same teams. And that's why I would do it. Circuits, I'd bring back Sepang, that's for sure. I'd bring Turkey back, I think. I thought Turkey was a good circuit. Of the current ones, I'd get rid of a few. I'd get rid of Jeddah, I think. I'd get rid of Qatar. I shouldn't be saying all that because I don't want to sound like I'm in any way anti those. I just think they're quite boring circuits, that's all. And, well, I think the others are more or less okay. Maybe I would say, no, if you want to go to Austria, you've got to go to the full Austrian old circuit, not the new one. I'm being silly now, aren't I? Anyway, I kind of answered your question. Blaze X1 or Blaze 11 maybe. Hi Peter, why is Lewis so strong in race pace compared to George consistently, whereas he struggles in qualifying? Historically, Lewis' strong suit was qualifying, but in recent years it's changed. Yeah, well it has, and it's because the car's not very good. And I've predicted this 2 years ago. If the Mercedes was not good, there is no way in the world, after what happened in Abu Dhabi 21, and having George in the other car now instead of Valtteri, which is the guy that Lewis wanted to keep, there's no way in the world on a difficult day with the car on an edgy circuit, Lewis is going to be as quick as George Russell, and he isn't, as predicted. And that's because George is a young lion. The only thing he's got to do is beat Lewis, really, to look great. And if he can lead a Grand Prix as well, or win a race, even better. But from Lewis's point of view, been there, done that, give me a decent car, I can still win Grand Prix for you. And I'm going to do the best job I can in qualifying, but I'm not going to, on a white knuckle, 5th gear, 6th gear corner with crosswind and a bump in the middle, I'm probably not going to take it flat. And he would never admit that, but I think that's understandably the case. And I don't think it's a negative about Lewis at all. I just think, why would he? But in the race, yeah, for sure. He's very good at managing tyres, very good at race situations, and very good at bringing the car home. Interesting, that battle, if that's what you can call it, with Fernando in the early laps, when he made a few mistakes, didn't he? But I think that was more, he was so far off his own pace at that point, and there was no way he'd get past Fernando, that he just, tried a few things and maybe got a bit too close, but he still recovered all right. And then he was really good at the end. Just a shame he wasn't on the right tyre in the last 10 laps. Because I remember thinking, there's no way Lewis is going to let George pass. But of course, with DRS, there's nothing you can do, is there? Nothing. His heart must have sunk when he saw George going past him. So yeah, he drove well in the race for sure, and at least he got fastest lap. There's something in that. Hi Peter, this is from RMDS KDVL. Hi Peter, will Red Bull be able to cure their curbing issue? Can they win the Constructors' title with Perez this year? Your thoughts, please. Well, they won the race, didn't they? I still wonder about this curbing issue. When you look at the curbs that McLaren are using, we're talking about 2 or 3 centimeters at most, and the McLaren does have a nicer ride, there's no question about it, and that does have an effect down the straight that follows. But as Max said, you don't use curb, particularly sector 2 where the main advantage is from using curb. The upside is you can actually look after your tires a little bit better, and most of the circuits will have enough pace and length and strength in sectors 3 and 1 with straights and proper corners for it not to be that much of an issue. It was just an issue at Monaco because every sector was all about curbs, really, apart from the swimming pool entry. It was not much curb. Well, it's a bit of curb. Okay, yeah, maybe it hurt him a little bit into there as well. But take Monaco out of it, there aren't many more circuits where even if they don't cure the problem and Max has to drive around in sector 2 in Canada style without using curb, he's still going to win races for sure. Can they win with Perez in the other car? Yeah, there's a lot of easy circuits coming up in easy conditions where Perez can cruise around and doesn't Windsor sound cynical these days? Where Perez can drive beautifully and finish 2nd or 3rd behind Max. Or if Max is 3rd, Perez can be 4th, whatever, or might even luck into a win or 2. Who knows? He's still very capable of winning Grand Prix. Perez, don't write him off. So yeah, of course they can. He's not the same as having Lando and Oscar Piastri, which is a very special combination, but it's about the same as Leclerc. No, it's Leclerc's Sainz. I mean, Sainz is definitely quicker than Perez at the moment, isn't he? He's doing a better job. But I think they can still do it, definitely, with Perez in the other car. I think Perez is due for some good results, and he'll probably get them fairly soon. I don't understand why some are suggesting Sainz should choose Williams over Audi. I agree that Williams could be better for 25, but isn't the long-term potential higher at Audi? Yeah, exactly as we were saying earlier. No problems that you've asked the same question, but just to reiterate, I totally agree with you. Very short-term decision if he does go to Williams, just to have a better 25, and he should be thinking of 26 and beyond. And look forward to 25, where he can only look good, really, because the team's at an all-time low, and all he can do is look good. And Guanyu Zhou had a horrendous weekend, didn't he? Assuming, I don't know if they've announced he's staying or what, I don't know. But if it was Bottas, Sainz, it's not a bad team, and they would put together, I think they would start to improve quite well if they did that. And all Sainz has got to do is finish top 7 or 8 in a couple of Grand Prix in a Sauber next year, and certainly people like me, and I hope the rest of the Formula 1 world would say, wow, what a great result and what a great building block for Audi that is. And I think he could do that. And there's quite a lot to be said for growing with a team and growing organically at a time and being with a team when they're down. There's a lot to be said for that. Think of Mario Andretti, for example, who had won the World Championship he'd won the World Championship, and there he was in 82, and he was happy to drive a Williams at the Long Beach Grand Prix, and then he just took that drive at Ferrari just to come and take Pironi's place, came in, took the pole. There's sometimes in Formula 1 you have to take a step backwards in order to make a step forward, and again, going with Mario, he was with Parnelli and they were both at rock bottom. Parnelli was going to pull out. I think it was at Long Beach again, probably 77. And they were nowhere. And he was just in the coffee shop with Colin Chapman. And Colin said, come on, Mario, come on, have breakfast. And they sat down and they just thought about getting together again. And at that point, Lotus were not very good. And look what happened. He won the 78 World Championship. So there's a lot to be said for going to teams when they're a bit down and growing with them. And it's never, ever a bad thing to show faith in people when they're going through a bad patch. And I think if he goes to Williams, there'll be enormous expectation that he will come as a Grand Prix winner to Williams. And isn't it a great thing to have the Carlos Sainz name there and everything else? And then with a rude shock, he'll realise that the car's not actually that good. And Alex Albon's very quick. And And then what's he going to do? He's not going to be able to do any more at Williams than Rubens Barrichello or Felipe Massa did at Williams. Whereas if he goes to Sauber, they'll listen to him more and he can actually have an input, I think. And then he's got Audi. He can spend all year preparing Audi for what they should be doing. So that's what I hope he does that. I doubt he will, though, based on all the rumour out there. Nick Bosman. Lastly, I've had some uncomfortable thoughts on the hypothesis of Senna. I feel this defecation of Senna is unreasonably extreme. What are you talking about? I don't know what that is all about. I mean, we're all massive Senna fans here on this channel, so not sure what you're on about there, Nick. Maya Georgi. Hi, Peter. Greetings from Romania. Hello there. Great country. Jet engines. Dacia. Just one question. Why did Russell not get a 5-second penalty for his 4th track limit strike? With penalty, Hamilton would have been 3rd. That's interesting, isn't it? A bit like the Formula 1 calendar, which I sort of take for granted and don't really look at. And just see where everybody's going for the next race. All this track limit stuff and penalties. I don't really understand it, let alone take note of it. I just assume that they all know what they're doing. But if you've noticed something that should be a penalty, then good for you. And I mean that sincerely. I think there's so many of these things, you know, being called, 2 drivers have been called to see the stewards, the offence was this, the offence was that. And then you read it and decision, no further action, or warning. I mean, it's all written in this thing that makes you feel as if you're going to the headmaster's study and you've got to stand out there for 3 hours while the headmaster decides what punishment to give you. And they will come back, you know, no further action. Or sometimes 5-place grid penalty in the next race. And you have to work out, when is the next race? Is it tomorrow? Is it in 2 weeks' time? I don't know. I really don't know, to be honest. I wish I did know, and I suppose somebody would. But probably find that the 4th penalty, the track limits thing, wasn't 100% clear or something like that. We'll see. Tony. Hello, Peter. Tony from North Carolina. Do you believe Mercedes is handling Lewis's departure with a respectful celebration of his time at Mercedes? There seems to be contention and petty comments instead. Yeah, well, what do you expect? I think, you know, I mean, no racing driver wants to be beaten. Lewis Hamilton, above all, doesn't want to be beaten. He's won too many races, too many world championships. So when George is quicker, regardless of the reason, whether it's George or whether he's got something on the car that Lewis doesn't have, it's always going to annoy Lewis. And if anybody interviews Lewis after that practice session and asks what I can only call a stupid question, Lewis is definitely going to come over as somebody who's not very happy. Now, whether that means overall, when he goes home and he's sitting there with his family or whatever, when he looks back at his years at Mercedes, whether that means I hate Mercedes, I can't wait to get out of the team, or whether it was just a little thing of the spur of the moment, I would say it was the latter. And I think probably he does have enormous warmth and respect for all those years that he has had at Mercedes. But it's a question of all these comments that are taken out of context and appear in social media that they're taken out of context. What can I say? You know, you've got to, if you're a responsible journalist, you've got to put them in the true context of life. And yes, Lewis hates getting beaten by his teammate, for sure. Does he hate Mercedes? I doubt it. But he probably thinks it was never going to work with George, as I told you, and it was never going to work after Abu Dhabi 21, from my point of view, because it should have been fought further down the road. So, yeah, I mean, how many people, under that heading, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Contention, petty comments instead of a proper celebration of his departure. I'm sure at Abu Dhabi after the last race, there'll be a huge Lewis farewell thing, picture, all the rest of it. Probably just a picture, actually. And then Lewis will probably go and have dinner with the Ferrari guys. But there's so much other stuff as well. I mean, as I said at the end of my video, you know, Parnelli Jones passed away last week. How many of the networks, the big corporate networks covering Formula One, paid tribute to Parnelli, I wonder? Yeah, I'm not judging them. I'm just saying that it's very easy in this world of today, just to sort of sweep along and just look at the next thing or whatever the social media trending thing is and not think beyond the box, actually. Game of Ender. Tony, I believe Lewis's comments are because of Lewis's internal conflict with himself at this point with his career. Well, it's an interesting, I know you're chatting amongst yourselves there, but it's kind of reiterating what I'm saying. I think it's a question of when these people with microphones, put them in front of Lewis, are they aware of the situation? And, if Lewis has just been beaten by George, probably just a couple of tenths where George has done something that Lewis isn't going to do in the car. And the question is, so Lewis, you've just been beaten by George Russell, how do you feel? I mean, what's he going to say? So you two guys chat amongst yourselves, which is good. Luke Noonan says, hi Peter, are you getting sick of the excuses from Lewis? In 22 he was testing the car. At the end of 23 and 24 it was set up or even sabotage. It's becoming a sad end for Lewis's career. Not really, no. I mean, I wasn't aware of any of that stuff he said because I don't make myself aware of that sort of short-term soundbitey stuff. And I don't think Lewis has had any more or less input on the engineering of the car than any other racing driver. I mean, even Jackie Stewart didn't have a lot of input on the design of the Tyrrell, even though there are only about 12 people in the team and he could go straight to Derek Gardner's drawing board every day. Nelson Piquet, likewise with Gordon Murray. I don't think they had any input. Racing drivers don't have a lot of input. And you've only got to listen to Lewis on the radio to know that he doesn't actually want to get involved with the minutiae of engineering. All he's interested in is the things that will make him go quicker in the race. Like, can I have a set of medium tyres, please, when he doesn't have any? So, I mean, all that stuff was, I didn't pay attention to it, and I'm not taking that into account then. And I'm not getting sick of people asking Lewis stupid questions at the wrong moment, I suppose, is what I really am getting sick of. But I think Lewis is still very capable of doing an exceptionally good job at Ferrari, and he will have his days at Ferrari for sure. And he drove really well in moments of the Canadian weekend, not only in the race, but also in qualifying. Q3, he was fabulous. Not qualifying, but Q3, he was good. And qualifying, what happened? Yeah, he just didn't do anything. Well, they both went slower in Q3, but Lewis went a little bit slower by a slightly larger margin. But he was one of only two drivers to get under 1 minute 12 in the Canadian Grand Prix weekend. Don't forget that. Not slow. Good morning from Texas, says Bob. Jay at Lee Kambaga. I would say this is now the reality. Effectively, Red Bull is relegated to a midfield team without Verstappen, though midfield is now effectively separated by a tenth of a second. But that implies Verstappen's leaving Red Bull, right? Or not? If he's leaving Red Bull, where is he going? Mercedes? I doubt it. That's almost as unbelievable as Sainz going to Williams. Why would he do that? Anyway. Game of Ender. I don't think Lewis is lying or Merc are sabotaging him. I think he's just trying to rationalise a reason why he might be slowing down. Maybe, yeah. I mean, he obviously in his own mind, as I said, there's no way in the world he is as quick as George. Why do you think he didn't want George in the car? That's simple. I mean, we all knew that 3 years ago, that George over one lap, a really difficult, edgy lap in a difficult car, George was going to be quicker because he has much more on the line than Lewis. Lewis doesn't need to put it absolutely on the line anymore. He's proved it. But what he needs to do is win Grand Prix, in which he can still do for sure in the right situations. That's what Lewis is thinking about all the time. And I don't think he's worried about, well, of course, he hates it when he's out qualified, and that's the moment not to talk to him because his mind should be focused on the race. But if you keep going on about qualifying, it's going to annoy him and he's going to keep thinking about it. Simple, isn't it, or not? Bob, Peter, I'm a big fan of IndyCar days. Since Max has come on the scene, I've found that passion once again. Good. Yeah, Max is very simple in his taste of racing and life, and just keeps things very basic, and that's very attractive, I think, particularly for somebody in his position. And it keeps him hungry, for sure. And he just wants to win every race. Wants to win every race. I thought the most interesting, the best bit of the race was the last 10 laps. The most interesting phase of the race is when Lando was pulling away from Max on intermediates. And they got on the radio to Max and said, I think what they wanted to say was, Max, what's going on? Why are you so slow? But instead of saying that, they said something like, oh, Max, update on the balance, please. And Max, I thought Max was going to say, oh, the car's terrible, it's bouncing, it's doing this. He got back and he said, oh, not bad, front's going away a bit. And that was it. It was just like, okay, everything's under control. He knows what he's doing. We never know. We never would know what would have happened. But I wonder whether Max was just looking after the tyres like crazy and just thinking ahead at that point. Probably he was. But it's good, isn't it? He's very hungry, Max. Very hungry still. Wants to win every race. He says, as Lando breezes past in DRS and pulls away at a second a lap. Yeah, it was a weird time of the race. The fact that Lewis is trying to find a reason implies he's still on it and trying to find extra speed within himself as well. Yeah, he's not going to find that extra speed against George in qualifying. He's going to find that extra speed in what he can do with the car in race conditions. And I presume those close to him. And Lewis himself knows that for sure. Game of Ender, it's not excuses. He's still incredibly fast. Lewis coming, okay, all right, enough of all that. Roshan Satapathy, given that Red Bull isn't the outright best car this year, which drivers on the current grid do you think can win a championship in this car? What, you thinking now that McLaren is definitely a better car than the Red Bull over the full course of the championship? I wouldn't go that far. It's when you've been winning races like the way Red Bull have, and then all of a sudden the opposition's getting much nearer and maybe a little bit ahead on occasion, that you tend to think, oh, Red Bull have lost the plot. But they've still got a very good racing car, still qualified on the front row in Canada, still won the Canadian Grand Prix in this RB20 that's terrible now. It's not a bad car, believe me. And I think a lot of that is, don't forget, I'm not going to mention his name, but a Ferrari guy, I was talking to a Ferrari guy after Miami, and he said Red Bull are just playing. No, after Imola. It was after Imola. Red Bull are just playing, and they're making it a lot more interesting than it would otherwise be. Max had a lot in hand. And I wonder whether he's right. I've been wondering about that ever since, and whether he is right. Because, what I said Max would say after Monaco, I said Max might well be saying after Canada when he won the race, oh, the curbs were not, but I won the race, didn't I? Forget the curbs, which is exactly what he said. So all these little things are being highlighted about Red Bull because they've been so good for so long. Everybody's astonished that the cars suddenly reach this point where they can't really get much more out of it, and they run into a few brick walls. So I think the Red Bull probably is still the best car over the season, to be honest. So, anyway, your question is who could win the championship in that car? Well, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, Lando Norris, possibly even Oscar. I think Carlos probably could. So yeah, Max obviously, maybe even, well, not Perez, no, but Max could. Max will. So there you go. Jay, gotta say, seeing the teams this close together with seemingly Mercedes entering the chat is almost an indictment on the 26 changes. You now finally have what you want as Formula One. What you're saying is suddenly we've got close racing again, so we don't need to make massive changes for 26, I think is what you're saying there. And I kind of agree with you, because I don't agree with making changes, something as fundamental to the sport of Formula One as making changes to the way you design Grand Prix cars and engines and tyres and gearboxes. Those parameters should not be affected by will-o'-the-wisp things like the fans want more overtaking or it's difficult to follow another car. They should be made on the basis of technology developments, safety, speed, what works for the circuit promoter, types of corners, but not on what they think the fans want to see. That's too wishy-washy for me. And you're absolutely right. The 26 cars were based on that. Oh, we want more overtaking, we want to be able to follow another car. And now, the 22 cars were, and now the 26 cars basically the same thing, without the porpoising and the bouncing. And okay, electrification, but now they're making it even more easy to overtake. You not only have double DRS, front and rear, but you also have more power, which is taking away, as I say, it's taking away a lot from the art of defence and the drivers who are very good at defence and spend a lot of time overtaking, get their position, and then do a great job in defence. That's all gone from Formula One now, or will go, and it's a shame. So don't touch it, really, would be. And as I said, if you're going to have technical regulations that encourage new manufacturers, car companies, to come into the sport, like Audi, Honda, and Honda renewing, but Audi and Ford, then at least give them the respect to be able to come in and use some of the technology that they do very well, i.e. regenerative front braking. But they're not allowed to do that. I mean, you can imagine if it was 1953 and the FIA had said, okay, you've done your penance now, Mercedes, post World War II, you can come back into Formula One, but you're not allowed to use fully enveloping aerodynamic bodywork, you can't have an air brake, you can't have desmodromic valves, you can't do this, you can't do that. What would Mercedes have said? They said, well, why do we want to come in? You can't, I think if we want Audi, we have to let Audi come in, and everybody should have to start using the front brakes to regenerate power, which is a more logical thing anyway, actually, I would have thought. I mean, there's another thing. Why haven't they got active ride in 26? I don't understand that. They're talking about curbs and this and that and bouncing. Let's get rid of all that stuff and just have active ride on the cars. All the technology's there. It's infinitely cheaper and more simple than it was back in 1992 when they banned it, or 93 when they banned it. And now it's all out there. We're supposed to be the pinnacle of automotive engineering. Why don't we have it? A couple of super chats. Thank you very much. Perpetually biased. Sounds like me. Thank you very much for that super chat. Hello, Peter from Detroit. Discovered you during your stint at Speed TV. Thank you. Love your channel. It was just one pure Formula One talk. Thank you for your work. Earlier this year, you had the idea of discussing a story from the past at the start of the streams. Please bring that back. I will. I've actually got a proposal in with a large photographic archive agency at the moment to do a series of great races from the past in the style in which we do the current races, using their images. So hopefully that'll come off. It doesn't, I'll still have a go at doing it, but we've done a couple already. We did the 62 German Grand Prix, and I think I've done one other, I can't remember which one. Yeah, thank you very much for your kind comments and great memories of the speed days. Steve Matchett, Bob Varsha, David Hobbs. Wow, what a bunch of guys they were. F1 Hens, another super chat. Thank you very much. Will we V10, V12 a bit too much, I guess, with all the biofuels and changes in automotive market, gasoline cars having a bit of a rebirth? Will we get in, let's say, a 2032, an engine regulation with V8 e-fuels? Wow. I was talking to a friend yesterday who's designing what's Ken Anderson, I've got to tell you. He's doing this new GT road car, and he's doing his own flat 12 normally aspirated engine for it. Wow. And I was talking to my son about this, actually. We were saying, what would be the ultimate engine configuration in terms of today, in terms of fuel, power, noise, weight distribution? And we both came to the conclusion, completely erroneously, of course, that it would be a flat 12. Anyway, a V8 would be good, wouldn't it? I don't know. They're so locked into this whole, the way they're going with the engines, electrification thing, that I imagine it's going to be even more than 50% by 2032. Almost certainly will be, won't it? Of course, the other question is whether electrification is the way to go. There are so many other ways. So, I don't know. It's all, I was going to say it's all a mess, but it's not a mess. It is what it is, and the cars will be out there and they will eventually race and we'll have Grand Prix and someone will be the winner. But is it our job to say this is wrong, this is right, or just to accept it and read all the gushing reports in, the FIA websites? I don't know. I'm betwixt and between it all in terms of, excuse me, I just got a refill of e-fuel here. I'm betwixt and between in terms of how critical to be of the heart of our sport, because there's a point where you have to say, well, criticism's a destructive thing, and we need to be supportive, equally there's a point where you can say, this is wrong, that's wrong. It's difficult. It's a very difficult balance to strike, I think. But flat 12s, I mean, I was lucky enough to be around when flat 12s were winning Grand Prix, and believe me, beautiful. And there's a bit of chat going on. Hello from Spain, Steve. Hey, I'm in Spain, so hello to you. Just had a torrential rainfall here, and I'm absolutely delighted to see that the internet is still working well, I think. He says famous last words. Let me just check. I think it says stream excellent or something like that. Yeah, I always love to see that sign. So that's good. Good on Spain as well for having that infrastructure. Harsh Deep S. Jawada says, this is a great time for the live stream. Thanks, Peter Windsor. Yeah, well, thank you very much. I know it doesn't suit some people where they are in the world, but apparently, and obviously you've got to take into account the global clock here, but apparently the best time for a live stream is about 8 o'clock in the night on a Wednesday. But what that translates to in other countries, of course, depends on the priorities that you place on it. But here we are doing one at 1 o'clock, breaking all the rules, 1 o'clock on a Tuesday. And yeah, I'm going to have to, we've got about another 45 minutes, I guess. Jay, thoughts on Canada? 6 stars out of 5. Yeah, it's a good race, wasn't it? A very good race for the Canadians. 350,000 there over the weekend, they said. I don't know whether that means Saturday and Sunday or includes Friday, but big crowds there. Weather was changeable, as we predicted, and I think some of the teams did set their cars up for the race, as I predicted, and it was non-stop tenterhooks, wasn't it? I really thought Lando was going to win that race, as I say. I'm amazed that he didn't win that race and passed Max in the last 10 laps in DRS. But Max just drove so well in the first couple of laps. When Lando, obviously the tyre's not fully up to temperature, and Max just got the car perfect and just got away from him out of DRS. Nick Lamoure, any thoughts on the 26 regs? Apologies if you already answered. Well, yeah, we've been talking about it, Nick. Don't worry about it. But we have got a video coming out fairly soon, within the next few days, with Craig Scarborough talking about the regulations and all aspects of the new car. Bearing in mind the rules haven't yet been published. What we've got is a sort of overall pro forma of where they're going. So look out for that. I'll be putting out some some warning. That's not warning. I'll be announcing when it comes out anyway. So watch this space. Team Red Guts. With Max having a more than 2 DNF lead on Charles, do you think the fight for the Drivers' Championship is over? In other words, Max can fail to score in 2 races now and still lead the championship. No, I don't. I mean, that actually, to me, shows how close it is still. Surprisingly, given how good the Red Bull RB20 has been by and large. And don't forget, it had that very unusual mechanical failure in the Australian Grand Prix when the brakes exploded in the right rear. So I don't think it's by any means over. And I don't think anybody at Red Bull would be thinking that. And certainly not Max. Max won't even be looking at the points. He'll be just thinking only of the next race. He'll be thinking now as we speak. He's sitting in the bath thinking of the lap of Barcelona, like Mika Hakkinen used to think. That's just sitting there with his eyes shut, thinking, turn 1, 2, bring the car right. Yeah. It's what he's doing. So he's not thinking about the championship at all. Which is good. I think Max is one of these guys that, if the championship becomes part of the race, then he'll obviously race accordingly, as we saw in 21. But until then, he just goes out and tries to win every race. Amsterdam Kush 1103, the goat herder, end boss of Formula 1 journalists. Thank you very much. I'm not sure about this goat business. I know what you mean, but it's very kind and it's not true. There are millions of people out there doing a far better job than I. I just have fun with you guys, and I'm lucky enough to have been involved in Formula 1 for a long time and still do great things. I mean, I'm going to McLaren on Thursday doing some stuff there, and be hanging out with Zach and the boys and girls, and looking forward to that. And yeah, I'll probably go up to the Spanish Grand Prix for a day or two. Hopefully it'll be the right weekend. Robert Good. Good morning, Mr. Windsor from California. Good morning, California. Yeah, wonderful. Hope you have a good day. California, we should never forget the contribution California have made to Formula One over the years, apart from the Long Beach Grand Prix and a racing infrastructure that produced such drivers as Dan Gurney, Phil Hill, Richie Ginther, Bob Bondurant over the years. But they've also had, Kenny Hill has been making pistons for Ferrari for more years than I've been around, that's for sure. Hitco, based there as well. Talked to Fernando Alonso about Hitco brakes. And it's just all that part of that amazing aerospace industry that they have in California there. Brilliant. So got a very soft spot for California. Sammy 28. Hi Peter, really enjoy the show. Do you think Red Bull will go back on Perez' contract extension if his poor performance continues? Well, no, I think they've probably extended all their sponsorship contracts as well. So it'd be quite difficult to do that, wouldn't it? Just to remind you, they're all the companies that he brings to Red Bull. So if they were to get rid of Sergio because he hasn't driven very well, that's a lot of money they're going to be saying goodbye to, is it not? So yeah, and it's not to say he's a paid driver, and if he wasn't as talented as he was and hadn't won the races he has and had handled the career the way he has, he wouldn't have all those companies saying to Perez, now you're at Red Bull, we want to sponsor the team. So it's all engineered by Perez, kind of indirectly, but give him credit for that. Okay. As I said in the piece, it's a sort of bit of a James Hunt referring to Riccardo Patrese syndrome of, well, I've got a contract signed now, I can breathe for a couple of weeks and then I'll start racing again. I think what I didn't point out was why that used to irritate James Hunt so much. And it irritated James so much because James was of the belief that when you got in the car, and only when you lowered the visor, when the visor was up, all bets were off. You could still have your cigarette or whatever. But with the visor down, you are a racing driver and you give 100%. And you don't worry about contracts. You give 100%. That was James's philosophy. I think he's right. And most racing drivers, there aren't many around, but most racing drivers, as distinct from professional Formula One drivers, do that. So he's right. But I don't think Perez was thinking, fantastic, wet race, I've got a chance to show my talent here, I'm going to go from the back of the grid, finish on the podium, I'm totally into this Grand Prix, it's going to be brilliant, can't wait. I'm sure he was thinking, oh no, wet morning, what's going to happen here? Not detracting from him, but I'm just saying, in the situation he's in with his career and the money that he's brought to the team and the new contract, why would he be out there celebrating a wet race, saying how wonderful it was going to be? EL1 T3 Pro. Hello Peter, hope you're well. What's your thoughts on Max winning 50 of the last 75 races? A lot of credit to Max, a lot of credit to Adrian Newey, and more fool the teams now that Adrian is available. More fool the teams that aren't able to attract him. If Mercedes are unable to attract Adrian Newey at a time they really need him, then that's a worse indictment, I think, than anything else you can throw at Mercedes. Whether it be, the poor driver management or the way that this car has been going downhill over the last 2.5 years, or whatever you want to say, or Abu Dhabi, the way all the criticism, or having that sponsor, bringing that sponsor into Formula One that then disappeared in disgrace, and the CEO's now in jail over, Mercedes brought that cryptocurrency sponsor in. All that stuff is nothing compared with the fact that they haven't been able to attract Adrian Newey. Now, I'm sure Toto would say, well, we never even put out an offer. We didn't want Adrian Newey. We're very happy with where we are. But if I was on the board of Mercedes, I would be saying, right, Herr Wolf, why have we not got Adrian Newey? Why is he going to Ferrari or McLaren, or why is he racing jet skis in Cape Town? And there would be no answer really, other than Adrian doesn't want to work for us. And that's a sad indictment, I think. Because with the success they've had, the budget they've got, the prestige they've got with that name, they should have been able to attract Adrian. So yeah, a lot of the credit should be split 50-50 between Max and Adrian. More if you go with the Enzo Ferrari philosophy of when a car crosses the line, fully developed and wins easily, 60% of that is car and 40% driver. That's not to say that Max didn't help Adrian get to that point, and without Max, Adrian probably wouldn't have been able to get as much out of himself and the team around him in order to produce the cars that he has. Max is an integral part of that because he's on the limit the whole time, and there's no doubt about what makes a car better or slower, and there's none of this wishy-washy stuff about making it easier to drive. That's a huge input, but ultimately a lot of the credit should go to Adrian. Alexander Harding, I hate to start the chat with a negative one, but do you think Perez's new contract will have a get-out-of-jail-free card if Red Bull wants to switch one of the academy drivers in the future? Well, as I say, there's a lot of money to be saying goodbye to in terms of that packaging, all the package of sponsors that he brings indirectly through Mexican affiliates of large American companies or indeed other companies, and that's a big thing to say goodbye to. So I think if they were going to not renew his contract, they would have done so based on already some of the poor performances. The reality of renewing his contract is that it's more than just how quick is he, and Max, Max wants Perez in the other car in the same way Lewis wanted to keep Bottas. There's no difference, and Max's opinion, the difference is Lewis's wasn't. Ibra Gio, hi Peter, what is your take on when Zach Brown is saying that Lando is a better driver than Max? Thank you for your analysis. Love these videos. Well, I'll be with Zach in 2 days actually, but I think when you're running a team and you brought along Lando from the crib to where he is now, and obviously supported by finance, but nonetheless he's had a lot of faith in Lando for a long time. You probably think Lando is the greatest racing driver in the world, and he's going to be better and better with every race, and he's going to be world champion. That's for sure. Zach thinks that. I'm trying to be serious now, but he also probably thinks, when it's actually down to it, those last 10 laps, Max Verstappen was unbelievable. What was our car much worse than the Red Bull over those last 10 laps? This is what I'm trying to imagine Zach's thoughts were. Probably not. He probably thinks the McLaren was about there with the Red Bull, if not slightly better, and yet Max won the race. So that's deep down inside, when he's shaving in the morning, he's probably thinking Lando will be there. He just needs a little bit more road dust, and he'll be right there with Max. It's probably what he's thinking. Me, I'm thinking, watch out for Oscar Piastri. Could there be a chance, K. Ruka, could there be a chance that we get a new power unit manufacturer beyond 26? Cadillac is reportedly making one for Andretti. Hyundai looks to be making one as well. Well, we know Cadillac are there, and that's what they want to do. So that would be another. I mean, to be doing one for 26 now seems to be incredibly rushed. If everybody suddenly changed their minds and said, yes, we want Andretti, you're in. Here's your grid position. Here's your garage position. This is where you are in the pit lane. Whatever. Could they do it in time? Probably. It depends where they are with the engine. But yeah, I think Hyundai. I don't know. It's a weird. I'm massively into Hyundai. I've never ever shown any interest in their cars whatsoever. To me, that's the most bland range of road cars you could possibly have, until they did the i20N and now the i30N, 8-speed gearbox, twin plate clutch, unbelievable car. And then watching the Hyundais in the Rally of Portugal, I've suddenly become a massive fan. They're based in Germany, I think, the motorsport division, aren't they? So, but they seem to be a bit dysfunctional. I mean, they seem to have zero feel for merchandising and PR and all that stuff. They just build these amazing rally cars for Terry Neuville and Ott Tanak and Danny Sauder, and I'd love to see Hyundai in Formula One. I'd love to see it. And maybe they could do it in Germany. I don't know. It'd be amazing, wouldn't it, if they did that? Imagine. This is what should happen. Actually, it's a good point you make there, K. Ruka. What should happen is they say to Andretti, "Okay, you can come in, but you've got to run Hyundai's Formula One operation for them." That'd be cool, wouldn't it? Brilliant, and get Terry Neuville to go into Formula One. That'd be even better. Excellent. Something has disappeared from my screen. I hope it's not OBS saying there's a problem. No, it seems to be all right. I'm so far back on questions. Even if somebody was writing something now, I'm not sure I'd get to it. Suspicious Pixel. Hi, Peter. What do you think of the debacle that Sergio intentionally drove his unsafe car to the pits so as not to produce a safety car? Do you think Red Bull's and Sergio's penalty was too light? Is that what happened? I don't know. Let me think about that. Why didn't I think of that at the time? I thought of that. I didn't think of that at the time because I was just thinking. Sorry, I'm just looking at YouTube now. It seems to be way behind where we are. Everyone can see me, I think, can't they? I think he was just trying to get back to the pits, wasn't he? Or were they on the radio saying, "Don't stop, don't bring a safety car out"? Sorry, I haven't got the question up. I've kind of lost my. That should be there. I don't know what to say about that. I don't know how unsafe it was. I can't really remember the bits flying off it. Yeah, but it all went ahead, didn't it? It all worked. I'm a bit confused by that one. It's a good point you make, and I'm confused because I hadn't really thought that one through, and I'm not sure that was why Sergio drove it. I think he just drove it from the natural thing of wanting to get back to the pits because the car was still drivable. And how do you know? Okay, a safety car. Yeah. I didn't know what penalty he got either, so I'm completely lost on that one. But it's a very good point you make, Suspicious Pixel. I'm going to have to do my homework on that one. Sorry. WDC will not open up to other drivers until they start making zero material mistakes, those that cost positions in the same lap, as Max currently does. I mean, Park Monaco 24, but you need a lens to find them. Yeah, well, that's right. You know, that was the beauty of Max's. And while I'm speaking, I'm actually going to open up all the emails from the FIA to see if I can see which one this was. Carl, there we go. Let's read this out because you make a very good point about safety car. Okay. Serious mechanical difficulties after significantly damaging the car. The competitor is fined €25,000. Drop of 3 grid positions for the next race. Okay, so that's, I think, the Spanish Grand Prix. The stewards heard from the driver of car 11, Sergio Perez, team representative, and reviewed video, team radio, and in-car video evidence. After making contact with the barriers in turn 6, the driver continued on track for the remainder of the lap with a significantly damaged car, and thereby lost several carbon fibre bits on the way back to the pits. The team confirmed in the hearing that the driver had been advised to bring the car back to the pits as they were trying to avoid a safety car situation. The stewards determined that, as well as financial penalty for the team, a sporting penalty is necessary due to the safety implications of the incident. The penalty is imposed in line with precedents. Competitors are reminded. It's a very good point, and thank you for doing that. I'll tell you why I haven't read that, because that came out long after I'd finished that video, and I just crashed to sleep, I think, afterwards. And then I didn't do anything yesterday, Formula One-wise. So I think, looking back now, going back to your question, Suspicious Pixel, I think that's too light a penalty. If it's very clear that they told him to do that to avoid a safety car coming out, I think that's almost the same. It's not quite the same. It's almost the same as deliberately crashing, isn't it? To bring out a safety car, doing the opposite. So I would have thought that's not a particularly strong enough fine for the second car, particularly, because another team might start doing the same thing and say, well, it's only 5, a grid place penalty in Spain, and it's a fine, it's nothing. And I think you make a very good point, so thank you for that. And my opinion is that was nothing like serious enough a penalty. It just shows the job he does for Max Verstappen, doesn't it? It reiterates my point about he's the perfect driver in the other car. Yeah, there's another question from Team. Do you think heavy? Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's very wrong, and he should have got a bigger penalty for that. Neville Chapman, please tell us what you think the 26 regs will mean. Why is that like that? Will mean for us in terms of noise. Will these cars sound even worse? I can't imagine they're going to sound any better. Look at the 50% electrification. They're going to be even less consequential, aren't they? So even more and more people are going to have to go to rallies to listen to the Hyundais and the Toyotas, which sound great actually. But then the next one, Johanna Van H says, sound is okay. Okay, well, take you up, believe you that. Can Anthony Lung, can Aston Martin climb back very soon? Well, I'm not sure they can, because if they were going to do anything, why weren't they there being mega in the Canadian Grand Prix in neutralised conditions with a driver like Fernando Alonso in a car as drivable and chuckable as the Aston Martin? And I wonder whether it's a little bit of the syndrome that you get in when the driver wants to go a certain direction with the car and they've gone as far as they can and it doesn't actually produce the results that they want. I.e., they've got a good front end on the car, probably very stiff at the front, and there is no other way of getting the car to work. And this is not in any way a reflection on how good Fernando is, because he's exceptionally good, but he does like the car to be one way. And if you put Max in an Aston Martin, I wonder whether it would free up some of the other areas of where they could develop that car. That's all. Because it seems odd that they just don't seem to be getting any better. They've got a very good team on the ground of people. It is basically a very good car, no question. But they don't seem to be, they seem to get up against their brick wall and they never get beyond it, do they? It's very strange. David Binder, do you think Ferrari's bad race in Canada was a one-off? If so, why? Or a sign of things to come? Yeah, Ferrari wondering the same question, for sure. Absolutely for sure. Wondering the same thing, where it's all gone. And it's, I did say after Imola, their upgrades were a bit disappointing. They didn't give them the top speed improvement that they hoped for. And so therefore they had to start compromising and running probably less downforce than they would have been comfortable with in Canada, which is why they couldn't get the car to work, the tyres to work, the car felt lacking in grip. And the only way forward for Ferrari now to beat McLaren, for example, is to find more top speed in the car without compromising their sweet spot for being able to drive the thing as well as they want. Because there aren't that many more Monaco type circuits coming up. And that's a big ask in mid-season for Ferrari to do. Reliability-wise, I suspect they'll be on top of that. It's a bad sign, isn't it? I mean, they did actually fix the problem on Leclerc's engine back into the race. So they got him to play with various mixture things, whatever they were, timing things on the engine, and he got it back. But it's unusual to have had that sort of problem. In the same way it's unusual for Red Bull to have had that brake problem in Australia, so it's not as if it's unheard of. So obviously they need to be on top of reliability. But the other interesting thing about Leclerc's race was that for the first time, apart from that business of, I mean, it wasn't a good weekend, let's put it this way, for Brian, his new race engineer, because there was that business of sending him out on the intermediates when qualifying hadn't been declared wet. And then during the race, he said, when he said, I'm feeling the engine's down on power, what's going on? How much am I losing? And they said, and Brian said, are you losing quite a lot, but keep going, or something like that. And Charles snapped back and said, well, that's not the answer I want. I want to know how much I'm losing. And he's quite correct. I mean, if you're driving a Formula One car and you ask a specific question, how much time am I losing on the straight? You expect an answer. You don't just want, oh, you're losing a bit or a lot or whatever the answer was. And I thought that was an interesting dialogue between the two. Don't know where that's going to lead to either. Hit the like, guys. Well, that's very kind. Thank you very much. Adnan Sarayev. Hi, Peter. Just curious. Do you attend all 24 races this year? No, I don't. Definitely not. I'm not sure I can handle that at all that travel. It's the travel. It's the thing. I wonder whether it's because I'm not 32 years old anymore, or whether it's travel in general is definitely more exhausting and stressful than it used to be. And I think it's the latter. I try to keep as fit as I can. And traveling, when I do travel, is not an issue at all. But traveling is much more difficult and more stressful than it used to be in the in any era, really, any previous era. It's much worse post-COVID. I don't know why, because of the security checks and the way it's all done now and the seating and everything. It's all dreadful. And because the airlines are not making as much money, they're squeezing more people in all the time. And then the cost of flying business goes up and up and up to the point where it's ridiculous and you'd be mad to even pay the money. And it's, let alone, well, they don't even have business on half the flights I go on anyway. And so it is a very stressful thing, you know. And it used to be, I was reading a Ian Fleming book the other day, James Bond, and I think it was, anyway, he had to get a flight. And he, first of all, he parks his Aston Martin at Hyde Park Corner to do something. I go and talk to somebody on the roundabout. And then he just drives to Heathrow and parks outside Terminal 2. And it's 25 minutes before the flight. I just thought, wow, yeah. You could do that in those days. But you can't now. It's 2 hours before. Now it's going to be 3 hours soon, 4 hours before you get there. And by the time you get there, you're completely knackered. So no, and the answer to it, no. Plus, I want to go to a few rallies. I want to go to a few golf tournaments. I want to do, you know, DP World Tour tournaments, that is. So yeah, quite a lot going on. ICE 11, hi Peter, it's probably too late already. I got a maths level exam in 1 hour. Need to harness that Lewis mentality and coolness. Love your content, provides a different perspective. Thank you very much. Well, good luck with the maths exam. Glad it's you and not me, is all I can say. Okay, I've seen that one. I'm just going up to a super chat here, but yeah, we'd had that one. Jay, oh, and you called it, Peter, that Ferrari lacked top speed. It was quite clear Ferrari wouldn't have a good weekend, though this was, we are checking levels bad. Yeah. Well, yeah, you know, and it was important not to get carried away by all the euphoria from Monaco, as I didn't, you know, hopefully, and I made the point after Monaco, I think that this was, you know, not to be something that we just assumed would be the case forevermore with Ferrari. They're going to have this mega quick car because straights are sadly what define the Formula One World Championship in terms of circuit layouts and what you require. So here's another one, another super chat, just F1 Hens saying, just saying an exclamation mark, hamburger. Yeah, there you go. Good. I feel that one actually. Very good. Game of Ender. F1 Hensel, he does admit when he's wrong, but he's not just going to take blame for it when it wasn't his fault. You talking about me or Lewis? Oh, just like Max. Okay. Here we go. Trail break. Braun Grand Prix was ready out of the box. Yeah, slightly different though. I mean, it wasn't as if they had to set the whole thing up from zero, was it? It was kind of ready to go. Just a question of bolting in a decent engine in the back and double diffuser or two, and Bob's your uncle. Yeah, you're right. They were good. I mean, what about Wolf won their first Grand Prix? No, it's you know, this is why I go on about this thing about it's going to take 5 years to get the team right, and I need all this time to get it right. Yeah, right. Okay. Just think Walter Wolf, 1977 Argentine Grand Prix. Thank you. Welland Vids won. Ham quick in red next year. Yeah, Mercedes had a good weekend, but the cold temperature suited them well. They'll crumble in Barcelona. Well, they're on the hard tyre there. Is that going to be good for them or bad? Probably bad. And you may well be right. That's all I can say. Chill flopper. Logan Perez and Sainz. Canada Grand Prix was horrible. Looked like rookies. Yeah. Logan Perez. Sainz? Yeah, he didn't look great, did he? Yeah, sad to see that because he's driven very well so far. But then Leclerc didn't look great either, did he? So give Carlos half a chance there. JP Eagles and Cats. Does Logan ever not have a bad weekend? Thanks for the answers, Mr. Windsor, Sheriff of Santa Vote. Tony, I didn't realise. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the bottom of this chat. I'm pressing the blue arrow, and every time I do it now, it takes me so far down, I have to scroll back up to the top again. So many questions that I haven't got to. I got to that super chat. Yeah, got that one. Thank you. Arthava Parasha. Do you think Max will be able to win this championship comfortably, even if Red Bull sees a performance drop off or the other teams gain in performance? I think he will win it. I'm not sure it'll be won comfortably, by which you mean 4 races from the end sort of thing. I think it will probably go down to about the last 3 races. I think there'll be some. I think Lando will win a couple more, and I think Charles will probably win a couple more. Mercedes might win 1 or 2. I really think it will go that way. But I think Red Bull will have a very good average car, which means, I don't mean the car will be average, I mean it'll be good over the average, by which I mean I think he's going to win the other races. And I think in those bad races, or less good races, he's still going to be right there. So the points are just going to accumulate and accumulate. The Red Bull is a superior car. You're clearly delusional, says Wheelie Bin at Sean Otig. Anyway, there's a little bit of chat amongst yourselves. So here we go. It keeps locking all the time. Let's go start from be very annoying to all those people who've been waiting, but I'm going to go to the bottom. Ayo, hello Peter. This is quite a good question. What do you think of someone from the top 5 in Canada? As it jumps away. As I was reading it, would have used, if they'd one in the top 5 had used the wet tyre at the start, he might have been able to build up a pit stop gap and come out in front. Yeah, the same thought occurred to me, and of course none of them did it because they didn't want to be the only one. And when, I mean, go back to James Hunt yet again, when you're in decision about whether to run slicks or wets, for example, with the weather, so it's a damp track, and you're not on the pole, always do what the pole man does, was James's philosophy. And I think that's sort of what applied in Canada, wasn't it? If you were, say, I don't know, Lando Norris, and you'd gone for wets, you wouldn't have just gone on wets without asking your team what you thought Red Bull and George were going to be on. And they would have said, well, almost certainly they're going to be on intermediates. So you would have said, oh, well, I better go on intermediates. So that's how that works, really. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame. I'll tell you one good thing, though. I'm very impressed that they had a standing start because I know that's what the rule is and what they're trying to do. But there was a lot of chat. I mean, Carlos Sainz, I think, was on his radio with his engineer saying, oh, they must have a rolling start because we haven't used those corners very much in terms of coming out on the exploration laps, and it'd be very dodgy. We should have. They all wanted the rolling start, I think, and I'm very impressed they went and had that standing start. Love them. Andre Horrell, hi Peter. As big a Perez fan he is, getting hard to watch. How you think he will fare next race, or how he can pull himself out? I think he'll have a pretty good Spanish Grand Prix, to be honest. I think Red Bull will have quite a good car there, and I think Perez, it's a sort of circuit where he'll go quite well. Nice traction places and a few corners where he can, do his thing, and the car will be good and be good on the straight. I think he'll be there or thereabouts. I'll be surprised if he doesn't qualify top 4 or 5 in Spain. So doing his job as a number 2, but as we said, by not bringing out the safety car, he sort of justified his new contract already, hasn't he? If I've got to look at the stage of the race, see how much the safety car at that point would have affected Max. I have no idea. Well, I can only assume it would have affected him a lot, otherwise they wouldn't have done it. But having said that, they had a safety car right at the end, and you thought, wow, this has really destroyed Max's 5-second lead. He's going to lose it now, and he drove beautifully and won the race. So, Anthony V, hi Peter, sorry I'm late. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Canadian Grand Prix was rather good. Convergence is happening 100%. Yeah, very good. Thanks for joining us. I'm going from the bottom up now in a change of form and pattern of what I normally do. Abhigo Dip. Hi Peter, George has the speed, but where do you think he can improve upon, and what do you think of his performance in Canada? I think he did a really good job in Canada, and I think he was super quick, and he was everything that, if you hired George Russell, you'd expect to get from George. I think he's a slightly more spiky driver than Lando, and I think that shows when the tyres start to go off a bit, or he's on the edge, or he's having to race a little bit offline or do things. I think that's when he's prone to making mistakes and errors. I think he's incredibly forceful. I put him up there with the Kevin Magnussen forcefulness rating, I think. So I'd be scared to be racing alongside George, to be honest. But equally, I think he's just a bit more spiky than Lando. Similar corner approach, similar way he drives, just slightly more spiky, slightly more edgy than Lando in every respect. And probably slightly quicker over one lap, because he's a bit more of a late breaker and a bit more of a, I can do this chap. So I think he did well. I think he did as well as you could ever expect George to do in that situation. I think had Valtteri been in that other car, Lewis probably would have had a better Grand Prix. That's what I do think. I still don't think he's the right guy to have alongside Lewis Hamilton. If Lewis is your main guy and he's won 6 championships with Mercedes and 1 with McLaren, then it's not getting the best from Lewis, as I've said from day one. Happy Doggo, new to your channel for about 2 months, and it is fantastic. Thank you very much. For newer viewers, a bit of an intro to you and where your knowledge comes from would be good. Thank you very much, Happy Doggo. I hope I've got a happy doggo out there called Dexter. I think he is. He's looking forward to a walk, actually. Yeah, I'm sort of jack of all trades, really. I started life as a flag marshal and then started writing as a kid. When I say kid, sort of 14, 15, I started to get some articles published in local magazines and things, but local racing in Australia. And then when the Tasman series began each year, I started to write reports for that, and then got a job writing them for Autosport in England. And on the back of that, went to England when I was 19 to see if I could just get a job with one of the big magazines, Autosport or Motoring News. And I didn't get one straight away, but I met David Phipps, who's a very good photojournalist, who offered me a job working for him, writing under his name. He had 5 or 6 writing contracts. So I took that and came to Europe and lived in a bedsitter in Bromley, got paid £100 a month, bought a motorbike and rode around on that, and went to a lot of races, Formula 2 races as well. And then I got to know Frank Williams very well, and I got to know Carlos Reutemann very well, started to work closely with Carlos on a number of things. And so I've managed drivers, Carlos and then Nigel Mansell and a few others. I was looking at a picture of Raul Boesel, actually. I'd forgotten that I'd worked pretty closely with Raul for a while when he was coming into Formula One around 84, when he was at Ligier, and helped him with a few sponsors then. And he lived in my flat in London for a while. Stefan Johansson I worked with for a bit, and quite a lot of other drivers, actually. And I joined Williams as sponsorship manager in 85, and then tried to do my own Formula One team with Brabham, Bernie, and that didn't work. And then I joined Ferrari as general manager when John Barnard left his British operation where they ran the Formula One, where they built the Formula One car. I took over that, working for Ferrari. And then I went back to Williams as team manager. And then basically since then I've done writing and TV and YouTube and everything, and all sorts of other stuff. Still trying to help some drivers, and working at the moment on the Formula One exhibition as well. So yeah, done a lot. Lucky to have done a lot really, and met a lot of wonderful people, learnt from them hopefully, and looking forward to lots more in the future, gotta say. Hendrik Hertzer says, I wonder how Lewis will react to all the mistakes Ferrari will make next year. No, Lewis won't mind at all. He'll be in a Ferrari, he's got a lot of money, he's got great life, he's got his 7 world championships, maybe 1 more, who knows, and down the road, and he's driving a red car, and he's got the fans, he's got Italy, he's got pasta and pizza and formaggi, pomodori. Yeah, he's got everything. Max Flashheart. I work with airports, so flew a lot. In the end, I had to stop flying weekends and taking 2 days on arrival before meetings just to keep sane. Yeah, speaking of which, very sad to hear the loss of Bill Anders, one of the great Apollo astronauts, who it took that famous Earthrise picture from the moon when he was in the command module going around. But he was 90, and he was doing a few aerobatics with a very old, a museum spec light aircraft, and sadly died last week. But what a guy to be doing that age 90, mega. I say mega, I mean what a guy is what I mean. Terribly sad, but great guy. Here's an interesting observation on the damage to the Perez car and whether he should have parked it or not. Gerard Crabb says, from the driver's seat, Perez might not have known how much was damaged. Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think that is the case. But I think also what's wrong is that the team make a call on whether they tell the driver then to stay in the car and get the safety car out, or whether to drive it back to the pits. I mean, if you think about it, that second call is quite dodgy, isn't it? Because imagine if something large like a rear wing or something had fallen off the car on the drive from the shunt back to the pits. that would have brought the safety car out anyway, and they would have got an even bigger fine, you would imagine. So, you know, it's a very, that's why I've been thinking about it for a while about that one, because it's so unusual to be in a situation where you can tell your driver to either stay there or drive back to the pits. It's a very odd decision to make. Well, it's an unusual decision to have to make. And I think if they made that decision based on they wanted to keep the safety car in the pits, that's very bad that Red Bull did that. Very bad, I think. Max Flashout says, flying is hard on the body even when you're young. Yeah, well, yeah. 24 hours is an exhausting, Le Mans 24 hours is an exhausting venue. It is. I used to get medical dispensation not to go there because of the hay fever in the fields nearby. So that was nice. I was there to see Graham Hill win Le Mans in 72 to become the first and only man ever to win the Formula One World Championship, the Indy 500 and the Le Mans 24 hours. So I was there. I saw it. I was also there the same race. That's when Joe Bonnier sadly lost his life as well. Very sad. I was chatting to Joe before the race. I'd never spoken to him before and obviously knew about his history in Formula One and everything else he'd done and how well respected he was in the GPDA. Lovely man. He was sponsored by Swiss cheese on a beautiful Lola T280, I think, with the Cosworth DFV in the back. Really nice sports car. He was mega quick in 2-litre sports cars as well, Joe. And this sponsor had the logo on the car was sort of Swiss cheese with the holes in it and everything. Really nice logos. And they had around the Jobo garage, they were constantly doing cheese fondue with the cheese under the flame, and the smell of the cheese was just fabulous. And then sadly we lost him in the middle of the night. And as a result of seeing that accident, Vic Elford kind of retired. Peres Sataja, hi from Finland. Any chance of you coming to see the Rally Finland this year? Well, I would love to. I would really love to, but it's kind of, my rallying calendar is based on the school holiday calendar, because if I went to the Rally of Finland without my son Jack, well, I don't know, he'd just be ropeable, as we'd say in Australia, or used to say. So sadly not. It does clash. I think the only one that I can get to that at the moment, which I think it will be, is the Acropolis. So we'll see. Hopefully I can get to that one. And then a couple maybe at the end of the year. Anike Ruben, listening from Cape Town while at work. Thanks for the great content. Thank you. It sounds a little bit, to me, it feels like this show's been a bit all over the place. But anyway, I'm glad you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Miss ZZ, I always thought Checo was partial to a Kit Kat. Well, there you go. You see, that's Kit Kat Mexico. Looks like they're with Perez. That's one of his companies. Yep. What's all this? BRMH16 says Red Bull compromised safety for their own benefit. Yeah, well, I would agree with that. I'm more and more thinking, wow, that is unbelievable that they did that, and they only got a fine and a grid place penalty. Imagine, I mean, this is what they should have done. I mean, I know people are going to shoot me down, but imagine if they said 5-place grid penalty for Max Verstappen. That would have got their attention. But no, it's only Perez, so they don't really mind, do they? And the money's nothing, so it's not good. But as I say, it's the counterpoint to forcibly bringing out the safety car by intentionally crashing the car. And we all know that happened. So, yeah. I think that's pretty good. TJ Sorinaka, incredibly philosophical question here. We're all getting older, Peter. Thanks for the reminder. And then Smoke Too Much says there was a safety car anyway. Oh, was it? Okay. Or in that case, yeah, there was, wasn't there? All right. All bets are off because it didn't work. And as I said, if the rear wing had fallen off, the whole safety car thing would have come out. But the fact that they tried to do that based on they've actually admitted that it was in order to not have the safety car. That's the wording of it. That's unbelievable. What does Lucas Noxo say? He says, it didn't really, the alternative is for Checo to run into the first exit. That's a virtual safety car if he messes up and doesn't get full into it. Virtual safety car wouldn't change anything. It avoided the safety car, and if they had a safety car, Lando would have been right up Max's tail. But no guarantee of overtaking because he was faster, so it could have happened. Yeah, these are all hypotheticals, but it's just as hypothetical as what would have happened had the safety car not come out first time round. So I think it is unsafe. It's the intention that's the problem here, isn't it? What actually happened is kind of irrelevant. It's the intention. Attempted manipulation and successful manipulation is the same crime. There you go, intention. Max Flashart, totally agree. Schlock JHA, Villeneuve went personal bashing and undermining his whole career since 2014. Daniel replied in an equally disrespectful way. I mean, if you're giving it, you've got to take it back. Yeah, I didn't see or hear any of this because luckily I don't get to watch that stuff. I have my own feed, but I gather that Jacques was slagging off, well, not only did he slag off Lance, but he slagged off Daniel, which is a bit risky for him to do, given how well Daniel drove in Miami in the sprint race. So Daniel's obviously still got it, and he's still pretty good. And it was obvious he was going to go quite well in Canada. He always does. So, I mean, Jacques, that was a bit of an odd call for him to make to do that. And I think it's wrong, actually, do I think it's wrong? Let me think. I was not a fan of Ayrton phoning up Frank a lot to trash Nigel behind Nigel's back so that he could get Maurizio Gugelmin in the other car. But an ex-driver slagging off Daniel, I suppose it's fair game if he's being employed as some sort of expert. But what I have to say, there have been a few messages from Daniel recently when he's dropped the F-bomb, and I'm just wondering, I know they bleep it out, but you see it in print and stuff, and it's just unnecessary. I think somebody should say to Daniel, and he's not the only one, I got to say, but he's certainly one that springs to mind. We need to keep it clean in Formula One, because if they're trying to attack the new, younger generation, you've got to assume that some of them have got younger brothers or sisters, even younger, who don't want to be exposed to all that. Roy Niels, what are your thoughts on the fact that all new circuits are added as street circuits? Well, this is the anti. I was talking earlier about Bernie post in '95 onwards, effectively going that route of building all these super circuits in countries like Turkey and India and so forth, and this is the counterpoint to it. Liberty saying, well, we don't want super circuits in the middle of nowhere. We want our Grand Prix to be in the middle of everything, right in the middle of the cities. And Bernie never wanted to do that too much because he always believed that it's much more expensive putting on a race like that than building a super circuit. And once that's done, maybe it'll then lead on to other things in terms of its usage, and maybe it won't, but nonetheless it's a capital investment and it's there. But with a roads course, you're constantly having to go through political loopholes in order to keep the race on the calendar, the noise people, the traffic people, everything else, and it's a very expensive thing to erect every year. Same overheads every year. So that's why Bernie was never a fan of those road courses. But Liberty have come in and they are fans of them because they think it's much better to have a race in the middle that's called Miami than is called, wherever in the middle of the desert. So my thoughts are they're doing a Term and Tilke version of what Bernie did, except that Bernie would never have done them in the city, and that's why they've all got long straights and 90-degree corners. And I'm not a fan, obviously. I'm not a fan. And I've made my point, which is that what Liberty could have been doing and maybe still should do is build renditions of the great Grand Prix circuits if they want to have a race in Vegas, do it just on the outskirts of Vegas, but let's do the Nürburgring Nordschleife or Brands Hatch or the old Spa. Let's have those circuits, or the old Austria. Let's have those circuits in places like the Middle East and Vegas, so we can go back to all these great tracks, but build them to 24 spec, 25 spec, 26 spec, really safe, lots of runoff area, big pit complex, everything else you want to have, but actually have these old tracks and bring them back, rather than create these sort of weird street circuits that aren't actually in the middle of town anyway. So that's what I think. Christopher says, where did you grow up in Australia? I grew up, mate, in Fairlight, Manly, and got the ferry across the harbour every day to school in Rose Bay. And yeah, so that was the North Shore was my thing. I was right at the bottom of the North Shore in Manly. Great oval we had there for the cricket and the rugby, and the Manly Ferry, and great surf beaches. And across the harbour in the ferry, that's where I read Jim Clark at the Wheel when it came out on that Manly Ferry to Circular Quay. And yeah, what a great time it was. I think I was very lucky to have been brought up in that time. You know, when you are growing up as a kid, you imagine that's what everybody's doing, you know, at that age. But I realise now how lucky I was, and how lucky I was to be around when the Tasman series was what it was, and we had Formula One drivers in what were ostensibly Formula One cars, slightly different sized engines. And we, you know, as a kid, I was going to Warwick Farm, and there was Jackie Stewart, Jim Clark, Graham Hill, Denny Holm, Chris Amon, Jack Brabham. There they were, right in front of me. And I was closer to them, and I could approach them more and work with the Australian Automobile Racing Club with Jeff Sykes more than if I'd been brought up in England, I think. And I was very lucky to have that opportunity. And that's through all that I met Jim Clark. And I remember 66 going to school on the Monday after the Warwick Farm International, in which Jimmy had won, actually. No, it was 67, sorry. It was 67. Jackie had won the Australian Grand Prix and Jim was second. Jackie had won it on Dunlops in the BRM, and Jim was second in the Lotus 33. Unbelievably nice car. And I was in the top deck of a bus, and we stopped at Rushcutters Bay on the way up to what's that place at the top of the hill called? Forgotten. Anyway, Rushcutters Bay, just after King's Cross, and the bus is there, and the Travelodge was on the left, and there's a beautiful park just next to it. And as I looked out from the top deck of the bus, I saw Jim Clark and Jackie Stewart loading baggage into the back of their road cars, 2 road cars. Jimmy had a Toyota Corona, I think, and Jackie had a Rover, and they were putting luggage in. I couldn't believe, I mean, imagine it. I'm on the top of the bus. I'm in my school uniform. I pulled the thing, jumped off the bus, raced back to the hotel, and they'd just driven off. Amazing. I'll never forget that. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to have to go now. It's 3 o'clock where I am, and I've got lots to do. Dexter for a walk, Jack to get from school, golf, all sorts of things coming up. Very important things. So there we go. Thank you, those who brought that whole business of the Perez thing to my attention. I sound pompous when I say that. It's just that when you do the video on Sunday night, there's a lot of that stuff doesn't come out till well after the race, and so I just kind of switched off. But thank you. I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? That okay, Roger Martin, love your show, Peter. Did Lewis have new mediums at the end of the race or not? No, he was on new hards. George had new mediums. That's why he got past. Lewis's tyres came in right at the end, but it was too late. Yeah? So there we go. So there we go. Oh, Max Flashlight says, I grew up in Bromley, Christchurch in New Zealand. Oh, I grew up in Bromley, Christchurch in New Zealand. Is that Bromley, Christchurch, or you grew up in Bromley, then you went to Christchurch, which of course was the home circuit of Wigram, Lady Wigram Trophy race, Tasman race. Loving the stream, Peter. Here you go. Stephen Ireland's grandmother. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm going to put that up. Great way to, is it coming up? Let me just check. Loving the stream, Peter. She says, there it is. What a great way to end. Oh no, it's gone away now. Anyway, that's classic example. Here we go. Go back to here we are. Loving the stream, Peter. I want to end with that. Very nice. Thank you so much, everybody, for being a part of this, and especially Stephen Ireland's grandmother. Especially you. Wonderful to hear from you. And I'll do another live stream probably next week. And as I say, I've got a busy week coming up, let alone walking the dog. So must get on with that. But busy week, but I will try and do a live stream next week. Look forward to that as we go to the Spanish Grand Prix. And I'll probably be going up to Barcelona as well. So have a few thoughts on that as the weekend progresses as well. So thanks for watching. Thanks to OEM. Thanks to Jetcraft for your support of this channel. And thank you, the viewer, for watching as well. Take care and see you soon.